The biggest question surrounding Mob of the Dead right now is a pretty blunt and straightforward one. What the heck is Mob of the Dead? And also, who the heck even controls Mob of the Dead? Who's behind this and set everything up? Those two questions are the only two questions that we've yet to really answer about this map. Everything has an explanation or has some hints or a little bit of backstory to it, but this one has just been left wide open for us to figure out on our own, or Treyarch to reveal years later with no proof or explanation. It's just like, yep, this was it all along, and you had no way to really know because we didn't tell you or we didn't give you any hints. That's how half this dumb storyline works. We don't know. We suspected long ago when Mob of the Dead first came out that it was the devil. When you looked at the map just looked demonic. It looked eerie. You had this mysterious, angry voice kind of controlling it in cell block grief. It had to be the devil. Why wouldn't it be? You had like satanic rituals, you had all this stuff going on, fire and brimstone. If I had to guess what the heck hell is, this sure seems like hell. And that's where the theory that the devil controlled zombies came from, or at least the devil controlled Mob of the Dead. Maybe they were being tormented forever in this purgatory hell. That's what we thought. And then Shadows of Evil came around, and Shadows of Evil was different because we were presented with 4 sinners being punished for eternity. Except it wasn't the devil that was punishing them, it was the Shadow Man. The Shadow Man had watched all of their misdeeds and brought them into this world, and it was in this world that they were going to be punished for the rest of the time. And to us, it looked like a Mob of the Dead 2.0. Like we were going to get better insight into Mob of the Dead by getting Shadows of Evil. Well, that never happened. Shadows of Evil was different. In many ways, it was similar, but what you had in Shadows of Evil were 4 sinners being punished for eternity, except they weren't prisoners, they were pawns. In Shadows of Evil, the Shadow Man wanted them to complete the rituals, and the rituals allowed them to summon the Apothicons into this world. That was why the Shadow Man had brought them in there. They had a goal and a quest that they were going to go on. This doesn't happen in Mob of the Dead. In Mob of the Dead, our characters don't really have a goal given to them by an outside force. The only goal they have is really an internal one. It's for the Weasel to get revenge on the 3 other prisoners who killed him. That's all that really goes on in Mob of the Dead. They're not there to help bring the Apothicons in. There are no Apothicons into this map. So this theory that we had that suggested maybe because Shadows of Evil and Mob of the Dead are similar in concept that the Shadow Man is behind Mob of the Dead just doesn't really make sense from a goal perspective. What would the Shadow Man have been trying to get out of Mob of the Dead? It seems like the Shadow Man's role is to serve the Apothicons, but the Apothicons aren't being served in Mob of the Dead. This idea that the Shadow Man could not have been involved in Mob of the Dead also is furthered by what we learned from the timeline. Some of you might remember in the Mob of the Dead Easter egg there was an audio tour that was given by Stanley Ferguson as you walked through the map. Stanley Ferguson is fairly important to Mob of the Dead. He was the one that was killed in the intro, and in addition to that, he is most likely who we believe to be Brutus. You can listen to some of the quotes from Brutus in Mob of the Dead, and they make you think that this is actually Stanley Ferguson.
I'm trapped here, just like you. I have a life, a wife and son. 9:30, dark begins his rounds. Why did you kill me?
Now what happens outside of Mob of the Dead years later is that Stanley Ferguson retires from his work at Alcatraz prison. And then a reporter under the instruction of Mr. Rapp, who is actually the Shadow Man in disguise, goes and interviews Stanley Ferguson. We learn on December 25th, 1943, as per Mr. Rapp's request, the reporter speaks to Stanley Ferguson, a retired guard from Alcatraz. Stanley gives a detailed account of the deaths of Al Arlington, Billy Handsome, Finn O'Leary, and Sal DeLuca. This is where that audio recording comes from that you get when you get the tour at the end of the Mob of the Dead Easter egg. And then what happens is December 31st, 1943, at Mr. Rapp's request, the reporter arrives in Morgue City to take in the sights, sounds, and smells. So here we have the reporter learning about Mob of the Dead and then going to Shadows of Evil. This is really the first time he goes to Shadows of Evil, and this is when he begins his investigation into the lives of the characters within Shadows of Evil and also all the things going on in the city. Now, if the Shadow Man was behind Mob of the Dead, why would he send his reporter to do an investigation on Mob of the Dead? It doesn't really make sense. If he was behind it, if he had orchestrated it, he would already know everything there is to know. He wouldn't need to send in a reporter to learn about it. It's for this reason that I think we can guarantee that the Shadow Man had no involvement in Mob of the Dead whatsoever. Here's what I do suspect though. I believe that the Shadow Man was inspired by Mob of the Dead. He saw what had happened in Mob of the Dead. Because these are ethereal beings, maybe they can look into dimensions, say like Mob of the Dead, where they're a part of Dimension 63, but also at the same time separate from Dimension 63. And he saw that these 4 sinners were being punished for eternity. He's like, well, I can use this. When I go to Morgue City, maybe I can also find 4 sinners and use the same sort of magic or process that was used to make a separate universe for them, I can then use in Morgue City. And perhaps it was Mob of the Dead that inspired Shadows of Evil for the Shadow Man, and that could be why Shadows of Evil is the way it is, and very similar to Mob of the Dead, but not quite. Now this still begs the question, who is the one leading Mob of the Dead? Who was the one that created this universe? I have a theory that it was Monty. We have a radio from the Shadow Man in Revelations that tries to make us think that Monty is the devil.
You do realize that he's manipulated you? That's what he does. Dr. Monty is just one of the many names he's been known by. The Great Dragon, the Beast. Is this ringing any bells? Beelzebub, Lucifer, Satan, the Devil.
Now, not everything that the Shadow Man tells us is true, but I do believe that there are hints of truth to it. And Monty is not always the nicest guy. We've had hints throughout the zombie storyline that Monty is actually one of the antagonists of the story. He may appear to be the good guy now, but in later games, he may not. And we've always had this sense and this idea that the devil runs Mob of the Dead. And maybe when the Shadow Man calls Monty the devil, he is referring to the devil of Mob of the Dead, and maybe Monty is the one behind Mob of the Dead. Maybe this is actually his job, to take sinners and punish them for eternity, and in this sense, he literally is the devil. He is the devil that is sort of creating Mob of the Dead, but in the devil, he's also not a bad guy. He's punishing sinners, and it seems as though his best interests are whatever the best interests of the universe is. That kind of seems to be what his goal is throughout Black Ops 3 Zombies. So it could be that if there is the devil behind Mob of the Dead, and the Shadow Man suggests that Monty is the devil, well, then maybe Monty was the one behind Mob of the Dead. But he's evil, but not evil in the way that you might think the devil is evil. That's going to wrap things up for this video. I wanted to share this theory that the Shadow Man isn't behind Mob of the Dead and that maybe it might be Monty. I think this is a pretty interesting one to investigate, and it's one that I don't think anybody has really brought up before. While there isn't much evidence, it does seem to fit. Monty has the potential to be a being like the devil within Mob of the Dead. He can probably create a universe like that, and he has been described as the devil before, so why not? Let me know what you think about this theory down in the comments below. I'm gonna go though. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and bye.